Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Tonight I wanted to share something that I've been reading on and God has been really speaking. I've been studying the transfiguration of Jesus, which is on Matthew chapter 17. And what kept coming to me was the importance of why Jesus chose those three disciples out of all the 12. And for some reason, out of all three of them, Peter was the one that really stuck out to me. It's like God was really wanting me to study him. So I understood that John was very close to Jesus. He was the favorite, pretty much. And the relationship between them were very tight. It was very like best friend type relationship. And I didn't quite understand why Peter was the one that went up there also, and James. James, I didn't really find too much about him, but Peter definitely, when I started to read throughout, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, I started to notice that there was a lot about Peter. And so I was starting to study his personality. What was it that Jesus saw in him that was really special, that really made him stand out? And what made Jesus really want him to be there in those big experiences? So I read, of course, the Transfiguration, and then I started to notice there's a part in the Bible where it speaks about a 12-year-old little girl that had died, and Jesus went to go restore her, to bring her back to life. And I also noticed there that in Mark 5:37, it says that he only allowed, again, Peter, James, and John to be in there. He still, even before the transfiguration, he still only allowed those three. And so it just makes you kind of wonder, okay, what was so special about Peter? So I went to the beginning of where Jesus found Peter. And so that was where I read in John chapter 1, verses 40 through 42. It says, one of the two who heard John speak, which are speaking about John the Baptist, and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first found his own brother Simon and said to him, "We have found the Messiah," which is translated the Christ. And he brought him to Jesus. Now when Jesus looked at him, he said, "You are Simon, the son of Jonah. You shall be called Cephas," which is translated a stone. So here you see, as soon as Jesus makes eye contact with Peter, he automatically sees something in him. And he calls him a stone, pretty much. So before anything was to go on, obviously Jesus already knew. What God was really revealing to me was the part where we're not perfect. There's a lot of areas where we have mistakes and we fall short. And in this, Peter was really resonating in that area, because you see where he messes up a lot throughout the whole, period of time that he was with Jesus. He really went through some tests, and he got rebuked, he got in trouble. He wanted to prove himself, but he was doing it in a very, how you say, ignorant way. He was trying to prove himself like he was really ready for a lot of stuff, which he wasn't, and Jesus knew that. There's a part where in the Transfiguration where, and I laugh at this part because Peter talked a lot. He talked a lot, and he said a lot of, he was speaking out of his heart, but sometimes Jesus would just say, be quiet, you don't know what you're talking about, pretty much. Not in those same words, but and so it was funny because during the Transfiguration, Jesus was being presented in front of Moses and Elijah. When that was going on, Peter was still trying to talk. He was saying something, and it says, while he was still speaking, God interrupted him. And to me, that was just so funny because you can tell his character. He was always, being told, like, you say you know everything, but really just be quiet and just learn. Sit back and learn. And so he got in trouble a lot, but you could see throughout the Bible that he really had a heart for Jesus. And everything he did was because, he was very loyal, even when he did things wrong, like when he cut off the ear of the officer who was trying to take Jesus away. You could really tell that, not just there, but in other areas of the Bible, where he really stuck up for Jesus and he really was willing to prove himself. And so I noticed throughout the whole Bible, well, throughout that section, that out of all the disciples, it seemed like Peter was the most outspoken one. You hardly ever heard the other disciples asking questions or even trying to do certain things that only Peter was bold enough to do. And so I was reading Matthew 14, verses 25 through 32. It says, this is where Jesus was walking on the sea. It says, now in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went to them walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, "It is a ghost," and they cried out for fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Be of good cheer, it is I, do not be afraid." And Peter answered him and said, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." Now notice that nobody else was bold enough to say this. And so he said, "Come." And when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw the wind was boisterous, he was afraid, and he, beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, "Lord, save me." And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught him and said to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And when they got into the boat, the wind ceased. Okay, so what God was showing me here, he says, when Peter was walking on the water to Jesus, his foundation was not yet established. The doubt, was what caused him to sink. Now we know that the sea represents the world, all the troubles, everything that wants to take over you. And of course, the winds, it was a lot of distractions, causing the waves and everything that was going on in that area in the Bible. And God was telling me, some of it resonates with me because, at that time I was going through a little bit of troubles, and God was saying, you're struggling, trying to keep your head above water, but you're doing it because you're not looking unto me. You're letting the distractions, you're letting fear, you're letting the troubles of this world, everything that's around you, especially with, everything that's going on right now, you're allowing it to get to you. He's saying, why do you doubt? And so he was telling me, he says, make sure that you tell my people to make sure that they are established. That's one word that really, really stood out to me, was established. And I was also being shown where Peter wasn't ready. God was showing him that. When he told him that he was about to die and all this stuff, Peter was very ignorant and he spoke too soon, like usual. And he said, "No, I'll be willing to go to prison with you. I'll even die for you," this and this and that. And Jesus wanted to let him know, no, you're not ready. Even though you think you are, you're not. So I need you to just, listen. And so he was telling Peter, like, I'm going to prove it to you. You're about to go through this trial, and you're about to deny me 3 times. And of course, Peter did not want to accept that. So, of course, it comes to pass. And there's a part in the Bible where it says that the 3rd time that he denied Jesus, the rooster crowed. And right then he saw Jesus, and Jesus looked back at him. And that's when Peter began to weep. So, of course, this is not for him to feel bad, but it's just for him to notice, like, you don't have it all together as much as you think you do. But I do love you enough to tell you to get up there. You need to be established. You have still areas in your life where you're still doubtful, where you're still fearful, you're still moved, and this is the time where God wants us to be very, very stable. A lot of things are being shaken, and the last thing we need to be is shaken also with the world. We are the ones that are supposed to be being led by God, not by fear. And so Jesus wanted to make sure that even though Peter messed up throughout the whole, session or whatever, he was letting him know, from the beginning. When he first met him, he says, you are a stone. So therefore, he already knew who he was and who he's going to be. So this just reminded me of a certain testimony that I wanted to share. And Jesus was reminding me. He was like, when you're reading about Peter, he's like, don't you remember that time in your life that, and I'm just getting visuals. And he was like, you remember? I was like, oh my gosh. So anyways, a small testimony that I have is when I was a child. I was about maybe 12. And, my grandparents, they were the Christians that I looked up to. I didn't really have all that growing up, but I knew about God. But I, went through some stuff, and at age 12, I was trying to grow up, and I just didn't pay too much attention to God. And so I want to say one day when my mom was at work, it was summertime, and me and my cousin, she was about maybe 10, we were at home being bored out of our minds, and knowing that it was summertime obviously made it even worse. We felt like we were missing out and that we just needed to do something fun. So living in some apartments, we had a swimming pool. So we decided that we were going to go swimming. So then me and her got ready, and we went downstairs and went to the swimming pool. And because it was a weekday and mostly everybody was at work, there was nobody there. So I thought about it. I was like, man, maybe this is not a good idea. Me and my cousin really don't know how to swim. But I was thinking to myself, well, as long as I tell my cousin not to go to the deep end, we'll be fine. So we went anyways, and it was really dumb. And I remember I was going underwater. I was like, trying to get my hair wet or whatever. And I told my cousin, I said, don't go to the deep end. She said, yeah, okay. And so while I was swimming, do my own thing, before I know it, I come out the water, and I start hearing her, and she's saying, help. And I turn around and I look towards the deep end, and there she is. She's right in the middle, and she is jumping up she's going all the way down to the pool of the floor, and she's using her feet to jump up and gasp for air and yell help. So during this time, I'm kind of laughing because I'm thinking, this dumb girl. I just told her not to go to the deep end, and here I am again, saving her butt. So I have never done this before, obviously. I didn't think things through. I was just thinking, okay, I'm just going to go get my cousin and that's it. Well, that was the worst idea that I've ever had. So I went and I started swimming towards her, thinking in my mind that she's just going to let me grab her and just pull her towards the shallow end. Um, that's not what went down. So as soon as I got to her, she was so drastic and so apparent, like losing it. She was freaking out that she began to pull me down and she began to drown me. And of course, me being short and not able to swim, I was having a really hard time. And she was making it to where I could not come up for air at all. She was just so frantic. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm not by a wall. I'm not where I can grab onto something. I'm right in the middle. My feet are just nowhere near the floor. Um, she's fighting me the the whole time, like constant pushing and just freaking out. And I start freaking out, and I'm thinking, okay, crap, how am I gonna get out of this? And I remember just like trying to push her off, and she wouldn't get off. And I was thinking to myself, oh, I'm gonna beat this girl when I get, but there's no way. Um, so I would just remember being there, knowing that nobody was there to save us, no adult was there, and I just began to just, drown. And I began to just say to myself, okay, this is it. This is how I'm gonna go. Both me and my cousin are gonna die today. And it's so crazy that a 12-year-old could say that. But right right that minute, I just had no hope. I had no idea how that was going to change. So I just gave up. And when I gave up, that's when, you know, I'm underwater and she's still fighting me and still fighting me. I'm just like, okay, this is it. And before you know it, all of a sudden I hear this really small, still voice inside, and it's speaking to me. And he says to me, he says, don't worry. He says, just listen to me. You'll get out of this. And I'm thinking, okay. I'm thinking, what's going on? And he says, don't worry. Just ignore what she's doing to you. Ignore the fight that's above you. Just concentrate on what I'm telling you. He says, swim and ignore what she's doing. Ignore what she's doing and swim as bad as you can to the edge of the pool. Now, once you get to the edge of the pool, she'll get off of you and you guys will be fine. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, okay. So I follow the instructions of the voice, and I just, she's fighting me the whole time, and I'm just like, if I can just get to the edge of the pool. So I'm just, with all my strength, whatever's left over, I'm getting to the edge of the pool. And that's exactly how it happened. I swam, and I don't know how I did it. Obviously, it was God, but I don't know what breath I had left in me. I got there in time, got to the edge of the pool, and she jumped off of me. And when she jumped off of me, I was able to get out, and I was able to get my air back, and we didn't die that day. So I was thinking, that was probably my first encounter with God. You know, he was reminding me while I was studying this. He was saying, remember when this happened? I said, yeah. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, at 12 years old, you know, me and my cousin, if the enemy really wanted to take us out, it definitely would have happened that day if it wasn't for God speaking to me and giving me the instructions on how to get out of the situation. And, it wasn't like Peter, where he immediately, pulled him out of the water when he yelled for help. But it was just so funny because I was thinking, Lord, why did I have to go through that? Why did I have to almost lose my life? And he says, well, sometimes, your testimony wouldn't be that great if it wasn't something that you really, fought for. And I said, you know what? That's true. That's true, because that was definitely, definitely something that was very big in my life, something that nobody could tell me that God wasn't real. I knew that for myself. I had my encounter. I knew that that voice was not me. That voice was not my thinking. I was ready to give up. Had no hope. I had no idea of anything that I could have came up with. It was only God speaking to me during that time that got me and my cousin out of that. And to this day, I think, man, my mom and her mom would have been, still mourning us if it hadn't been for God. And so it's just a big, big, testimony that I look back on. And so God was telling me, remember when you were underwater and you had all these things going through your mind, you had all this fear, all this doubt. He says, he showed me this scripture. It was so funny because I was just, he was giving me pieces of this, and he gave me Isaiah 43:2, and it says, where you go through deep waters, I will be with you. And I was just like, wow. With that being said, Peter definitely is in my heart right now. I'm just really being presented a lot of things that, God is showing me that, even with everything that's going on right now, even the persecution, everything that Peter went through, I mean, Jesus already knew from the very beginning, as much as he messed up, as much as he probably was, looking ignorant to everybody else, you could see his heart. You could see that he was really had a love for God. And so Jesus had patience for him, and really throughout the whole process, he still was saying, no, you're a rock. And he even told him when he came back, you are what I'm going to build my church on, because you have been a rock. And so even God was even showing me that even in these times when fear wants to grip you, you need to remember who you are in him and what you're fighting for. That's another thing that he told me. When Jesus was restoring Peter, what was it that he asked Peter? When Peter denied him 3 times, what restored him was the question that he asked him 3 times. And that was in John 21, 15 through 19. He says, Peter, do you love me? And he asked this question 3 times. And Peter was almost upset because he was, he didn't understand why he was being asked 3 times. Was because God was restoring him for each time that he denied him. And he was telling me, he was like, the reason why Peter was not established was because of fear. It was because of doubt. Because here he was ready for anything, but yet when it came to being presented, persecution, when it came to death, the thought of death, he was willing to leave everything. And Jesus understood that. He understood his fears. It's not like it's, not something that Jesus doesn't understand, but he was saying, you got to remember, this life is but a vapor. You have to remember that your purpose here and what God has called you to do, who you are in him, is the most important thing. You could die from the dumbest thing, but for you to live and stand for what you believe in, it's really the whole point. And so even though Peter was fearful, God was showing him the way that you defeat that fear is through perfect love. What is that Jesus said? He says, "Do you love me?" When you forget about the fear and remind yourself why it is that you're doing this. What is the whole point of this? Is because you love God and you know that your end result, you're going to be with him no matter what. So don't let fear, don't let doubt, not saying you're going to be killed or anything, but it's just, God doesn't want us to have any fear no matter what happens. He wants to make sure that his people are well established, that nothing shakes them, and to know that this life is really nothing compared to the one he's willing to give us. So with that, I hope you guys were blessed, and comment, subscribe. Let me know what you guys think. Have a blessed night.